So to summarize then, the must-haves and must-dos for real-world evidence, you would say, are good study hygiene, rigorous study design, and rigorous analytic plan.
Exactly.
I'd like to follow up on something you said about the methods, and you suggested that there is a recommendation to look at your real-world evidence methodology and try to make it as close to an RCT as possible. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Yes. So what's the downside of that? Does that really almost let the design define the objective rather than the objective define the design?
No, actually not. So we would all agree, if there was no cost and no obstacles to doing randomized controlled clinical trials, that would be the best way to answer any question. Now, there have been studies published to show that perhaps only 15% of clinical trials can be emulated well by real-world evidence studies. And recently, some major work coming out of Harvard has shown that, this is called the Duplicate RCT project, which was sponsored by the FDA, that in fact, when you can emulate closely an RCT, that is, you can make your variables, both your covariates and your outcomes and your exposures, look like they really match to what would be in an RCT. In the vast majority of cases, you get the same result as you would with an RCT. In cases where you cannot directly emulate exactly what the outcome measure is, and you have to use some proxy, or you can't really measure a covariate the way you'd want to, and so using something a little bit distant from that covariate, then the results become less likely to accurately reflect what you got in the RCT. So it's not that you can't do that, it's that you have to completely and transparently describe how far away from the RCT are you when you're doing your observational trial or your real-world evidence trial. And that information then can be taken into account by the regulator and saying, how credible is this information? Does this meet the standard for adequate and comprehensive data or not? And that will also be context dependent. It will depend on the question at hand, so that if you're developing a new if you're trying to find evidence for a therapy where there are few therapeutic alternatives and there is a huge unmet medical need, what is considered to be substantial evidence is different than when you're giving people a prophylactic that you're going to give to millions of people and you won't know whether it works for years and years to come. So we don't always need a randomized controlled clinical trial. And this was the subject of a humorous article a few years ago. I think it was in Lancet, which said, are we going to do an RCT to show that wearing a parachute when you jump out of a plane prevents you from dying? And the answer is no, we're not. We think that that's good enough to my experience. Mm-hmm. And the bar is much higher for proving causal inference for new therapeutics, but the same thing applies. I don't think we need randomized controlled evidence in every case to convince ourselves the new therapeutic works. Certainly, that has been the case historically.